Okay. So Michael, you told us about the theory. You've told us about the eternal themes, and David, you told us a little bit about how you apply it at a pretty unique place, Clay Street Project, but still a very business-oriented place. So it's really the practical application. Just imagining what the audience is thinking, I'm thinking there might still be some thirst for understanding, well, how does this work exactly? Like, especially when you're applying these Jungian archetypal patterns, applying them, down at the consumer level. Can you, spell that out for us just a little bit more? And feel free to bounce it back and forth.
I think, first of all, what I didn't mention at P&G and at Clay Street is the consumer is at the center of the world of our teams. And what we try to do is we're always trying to understand or create new ways to learn from our consumer. And so we use this idea of story and the archetypes in stories to help us learn from the consumer. So even in terms of how we recruit for focus groups, we start thinking about archetypes. We start thinking about archetypal patterns of behavior in terms of how we interact with consumers. And we do a lot of work with story in terms of talking to them about ideas within a story context, something they can resonate with.
I'll respond, excuse me, from the world of cinema again. And as I said, the movie Pride and Glory is coming out tonight. And I was brought in to help look at the ending of the movie. Because in the original, well, the movie is about the theme of redemption. It's about a New York family. They say they bleed blue. It's been a police family for many years with corruption and all that. And one of the brothers is trying to finally break this spell of corruption. And there's this incredibly dramatic final scene. And the writers and producers, they kept on saying, it's something about it doesn't work. And they brought me in, I was reading the script, and I said, the ending is not about redemption. It's about staying with corruption. That the solution that the writer initially came up with was just promoting how the corruption continues ad infinitum. I said, you know what, I think you're going to compromise your storyline. Let's go back to what I haven't used the word archetype, you did actually here on the Jungian, what the pattern of redemption is about. And it translates to whatever your product is, whatever the pattern of that product is. And I said, what's involved in redemption? Redemption has to do in part with a responsibility, an act of conscience, an act of paying one's dues, a sense of moral responsibility. If you don't bring that into the scene, and if you don't bring that into the product, it's really not going to resonate with the buyer. They change the scene, and it looks like this is going to be a blockbuster. I'm not saying because of my counsel. Yes, I will say. It's because of what I did. That's why this is a great movie. No, but anyway, it's the same thing with products, Tom, that I've worked on a number of products with people, and again, what you look at is, what is this product about? Go into the field of the product, and then begin an advertising campaign that's consistent with it. And what it takes is a real sensitivity. As David said, when you look at an initiative, you need to know the meaning of that initiative. That's where I don't want to say scholarship, but where the sensitivity comes in. And I want to add one little piece. This is not about trying to be really overly intellectual. It's not what it's about. I happen to like the intellectual world. I spend a lot of time studying and all.
Oh, really?
But ultimately, what?
No, I don't find that surprising. Sorry, go ahead. I didn't mean
but I'm also from the streets of Brooklyn. I grew up on an educated family, and the things have to be meaningful. They got to be applicable, and you want to find a way to show that this is not just scholarship; it's real life. Mm-hmm. You go to an Italian restaurant, there's certain things you expect. You go to a Japanese restaurant, certain things you expect. If you begin to have the inconsistency, you say there's something. It doesn't mean it's wrong, but it's that twist that comes in. It could be an introduction of chaos into a system, which is wonderful. But one needs to be aware of this.
I think you may have just answered my question with respect to the movie. But so last time you presented, and you gave the Hercules example, and you explained to us how things don't read right. Something, it just, in your words, it sounds a false note. And so that's kind of diagnostic, right? And so your knowledge, your framework of looking at the world allows you to say, something's not right there. But I think I just heard you say it's equally good at prescriptive. It's saying not just this is not right, but here's the direction it needs to go. Would you both say that's the case? Is that?
Yep.
So in Clay Street Project, for example, it takes you in a new direction. You just don't say, no, based on my knowledge of the Jungian archetypal patterns,
yes.
let's say, it's not just that you know one is wrong. You get some sense about what direction to take it. Would that be fair to say?
Yes. And again, it comes back to, understanding the patterns of a group. And actually, a group goes through these patterns of infancy, adolescence, and adulthood. And that, it doesn't mean that they're immature, but the group, in a sense, in its life is immature. And so understanding where the group is in their life cycle actually determines how you interact with that group. So through adolescence, there's a bit of chaos that goes on as a child is actually trying to understand themselves in the world. If you look at the eye of a group, the same thing goes on. So you actually can introduce chaos to perturbate the system only if they're ready for it. You can't do it and expect it to happen just because you want it to. So you have to understand that the whole system, as Peter Senge refers to as complex dynamics, seeing the whole system in 3 dimensions and then working with it in that way.
Yep. And the thing I'll add is that I've had a really varied career. I begin as an analyst, and I begin then working with organizations, and begin to work in the film industry. And I have David to thank for a lot of this. He really got me involved in this years ago. And I've begun now to consult with different communities where there have been terrible crimes. And they said, well, can you help us? And I said, well, what is it you want me to do? And anyway, when Tom and I talked on the phone the other day, I introduced a term that I've realized has been very important in all of us that are looking at patterns, okay? And again, I think it's his entire audience, is the word ethology. And usually we know ethnology, but ethology is something I hadn't been aware of until about a year ago. Ethology is a study of natural patterns in the wild, natural patterns of animals. It means if an animal is left on its own, how would it behave? And you begin to find that there are these deeply entrenched natural patterns of survival and creativity that are part of every living organism. What happens to the human condition where I think where we get into trouble is when we're estranged from natural life patterns. There are patterns for life. There are patterns for the early life, for midlife, for the later parts of our life. There are patterns for starting new initiatives. And when you begin to realize that we don't have to reinvent the wheel every time. Let's get a creative theme. Let's put $1 million into this. Let's look at creativity. I mean, that's great. But if you can just take a step and reflect on what is it that the people that were the holders of the wisdom traditions knew about life. You know what? They understood that life teaches us how to be involved with these initiatives in ways that are so profound. And they offer a certain blueprint, a certain schematics. And you begin to realize that everything in life is a response to some codes, whether it's the Pythagorean mean in architecture, whether it's a Fibonacci code with the formation of every living seashell pattern. There's a pattern behavior here. What we do with the act of human hubris is we believe, well, we're going to just create it all out of our own minds. Human creativity is a wonderful thing. It's one of the gifts we have in life. When that's estranged from tradition and when that's estranged from these wisdom traditions and these natural ways of life, I think we get into some trouble. And one of the beauties of what David's doing, as he said, is let's look at how nature, and it was wonderful the way he presented, how nature tells us about initiatives, how nature presents threshold conditions.